There are a number of games where you steal something, sneaking past a setup of defenses, or maybe you're trying to kill someone quietly, games like Thief, Hitman, or Dishonored. There are also a few games where you set up defenses, such as tower defense games, or very similar games such as Defense Grid Sanctum or Orcs Must Die. Very few to no games combine these two elements, a game where you set up defenses that require subtlety rather than the brute force run-at-you tactics to get past that most defense games have. This project focuses on creating a defensive setup around a keep before a roguish individual tries to get through. It's being made as a two-player board game where each player puts defenses into a layout and then switches to the role of a thief and takes turns in a race to steal the other's treasure. Within the gaming industry, there are very little to no games of either board games or video games that compare to the combination of setting up a defense and stealth gameplay like my project has. Within video games, there are a good number of them where you play as a stealthy character. It varies wildly in difficulty, from a game like Sly Cooper that has an ease of play and a level of fairly oblivious AI that for the most part have very limited vision. Then there are more serious experiences such as Thief or Batman that require patience and careful timing. Often, in those cases, you have various tools at your disposal to assist in your stealth. There are endless examples of games where you are a stealthy, but very few that I've found that involve a human setting up the area you sneak through, especially as a core feature. Stealth Inc. and Monaco both allow for custom-made levels, and then you can play those as a stealth game, but that's the closest it comes. And those work more along the lines of an entirely freedom-based creation kit without rules. It's more of a bonus feature the game has, and even if it's a notable feature, few can expect their designs to be played much unless they make something truly interesting. On top of that, few people are comfortable with the levels of complexity usually present in a creation kit. Most other games that allow for setup as a core element of gameplay do so as a tower defense style game, where the enemies you're setting up are rather straightforward and just run straight at you. Board games are even more rare for both of these aspects. This project was an attempt to combine the two, as I've never seen done before, setting up these defenses along with trying to get past someone else's hindrances. I began my student innovation project with the general idea, creating a stealth game where you create the defense, way back in the first class that we had dedicated to this SIP. The project seemed like it was going fantastic. I had a ton of ideas, got a lot of detail out into everything. I made potential rooms, defenses, characters, etc. Then I set it all up and played through a game or two. Honestly, it was a bit rubbish. The game was slow, the layout was too easily optimized, and it didn't feel like how you set up your defenses made any difference. It was too slow-paced and the rules were too complicated. This was all rather disheartening, since I thought it would be far better than it was. At that point, I actually was so disappointed in it that I decided to scrap the idea and come up with a new one altogether. While the next board game I made, along the same lines but more about an Indiana Jones-styled ruin delver, was somewhat fun in concept, I realized it lost everything that made the project truly innovative. I wasn't really setting up a defense for the other person. I had given up on my first idea too quickly, so I went back to the basics on that one. I wrote out the ideas I had for gameplay, I balanced different aspects of the design there and all the variations I could think of. Then I went through all of the pros and cons to each and every one of them, narrowing down which gameplay options I wanted into something that I felt was far more fun. Once I had a better idea, I sat down with some others, explained what I had in mind, and then we brainstormed on how to make that even better and truly feasible, resulting in this stage prototype. There were a lot of difficulties with creating this game, through both the game design itself as well as how it would be made physically. In the game itself, the most aggravating aspect was trying to balance the different pieces. It was very difficult to make each of the defenses, the treasures, and the characters all feel like they were in balance with each other. It was really important to me that there was no ultimate way to play the game, especially with how you set up your defenses, as that was such a key part of the innovation. Part of the reason that it was so difficult was that my two core pillars and phases of gameplay, setting up a defense strategically and then playing through as a stealth character, practically countered each other. Neither aspect of the gameplay could overpower the other side. To do this, I decided that the goal would be an unknown element. You don't know where your opponent will be trying to get to. With the limited defense options you have to place your traps and guards around, it makes you have to place them more evenly. This makes the second phase of gameplay far more tactical and interesting, while the first phase of gameplay feels like it matters a lot more. With creating the board, I needed to figure out how I was going to make it and the pieces. That applied to both digital creation of it and the physical creation. I knew that I wanted a hex grid, but getting it into the layout was not as easy as I hoped. I then had to edit the layout to better suit the game's objects and pacing. For the physical creation aspect, I needed to print off the maps as posters, and then each piece needed an icon, and I printed those onto sticker paper, which I then put onto Scrabble tiles. There was a bit of a problem with how to tell the direction of a defense while it was hidden, but I was able to solve that through the slight use of wood stain. Now that we have some background, let's look at what the gameplay itself is and the details there. When the defense setup phase begins, either set up a screen between boards or have one player leave the room until the defenses are set up. The secrecy of the layout is key to the experience, as it makes each run-through feel unique, and you can only plan so far ahead, and you have to make the decisions based on vague information. This becomes even more important with the Blake tiles. There are a total of 30 defense tiles in the bag that you each choose from. Each player grabs 10 at random. Of those 10, you may exchange up to 3 for a different room tile. This is important because some traps only work well in tandem with others, and by exchanging wisely, you're unlikely to have anything useless. Those 10 defenses are then put into your opponent's layout, which mirrors your own, almost any way you wish. The main limitation is that you cannot have more than 3 defenses within a small space, such as a single room. This is to prevent any truly impassable spots. If it was a single-player game with the goal of stopping someone from getting in, then this would be fine. It would be fine to have an impenetrable defense like that. But because it's multiplayer, you can't have the game stall up for one or both players like that, or else it ruins the experience. After both players have their defenses and 5 blanks set up, they draw their characters. As 2 of them start with a treasure, it needs to be done before you pick the objective. After that, you pick the objective at random. Every objective has a different treasure needed in a goal room. The Dodger's room, the Lord's room, and the Treasure room are those 3. Place the treasures into all of the rooms on your opponent's layout that have names besides the goal room. If a player starts with a treasure, then it will simply leave an extra room of the defender's choice blank. The first thing to note about the second phase is that every objective boils down to the same fundamental goal. Find the appropriate treasure for your objective, make your way to the room associated with it, complete the objective, and then make your way out, either through the way you came in or via any other window when in possession of the grappling hook treasure. Second thing we have is the stats that all characters possess. I went through a huge variety of ideas that varied from using 4 and 5 stats, including things like dexterity, strength, and intelligence, to having no stats to speak of at all. In the end, there are 3 main stats that you need to know: health, smoke bombs, and movement, as well as a unique special for each character. Every time you are seen, you use a smoke automatically, and if you have no smokes, you lose a health and take out the guard. You can also lose health from a crossbow trap. This is important because most characters, all but one actually, only have 2 health, so you have to limit how many mistakes you have. If you lose all of your health, you lose the game. The other player then has as much time as they want to complete the objective, and they don't have to take any risks. The default movement speed for all characters is 5 spaces. There's one character whose special doubles that. The last thing to understand, and potentially the most important, are the action rolls. At the beginning of every round, you roll 3 dice. The value of each die is one of your action rolls. These aren't totaled into a pool. Rather than that, any action that you take consumes one of your rolls. If you use a roll of 5 to get past something that only needs a roll of 2, you then, quote, wasted 3 points. Sometimes this is the best call. If you don't have anything to spend your action rolls on, you can also convert them into an extra movement. The future for this game has a myriad of possibilities available to it. You could release expansions that include more layouts, more characters, and more defenses, which would add to marketability, complexity, and depth, which are all very good things in the right amounts. One thing that could work very well for further innovation is making this into a video game. One of the core differences between video games and board games is the amount of information that you can have hidden from the player. With a video game, all of the defenses could be hidden, and it can increase the feeling of sneaking around somewhere. You wouldn't know the layout of the rooms, and you could add onto those. Similarly, you could have the game be from a different perspective than top-down, so you could be in a first person or right behind the thief in a third-person view. You could also remove turns entirely for a faster-paced game experience. One of the weaknesses of the project is in the marketability, because the game is only made for 2 players. While some more classic games are built for 2 players, such as chess, Othello, Go, etc., the majority of modern games can have a bigger group of people playing. While it's possible to do this, and the gameplay wouldn't be too different, as long as the game is similar to this one, perhaps as a co-op experience, that just doesn't fit with the core innovation, setting up a defense against a stealthy intruder. Straying from this innovation was one of the main things I avoided constantly. Potentially this game could be improved by adding different modes of play for larger groups of people. Despite that, the game is a very solid mix of simple to play, and yet has a depth of strategy with setting up the defenses, and a strong tactical element for the second phase of gameplay, both very definite strengths for a board game. The best way to improve the game and keep the core gameplay would be to simply add more options for players. In closing, the key innovation was to create a game where you set up defenses against a stealthy invader as opposed to the typically brute force rushing enemies most games have you defending against. To ensure an enjoyable experience, it uses the two core pillars of creative defense setup and tactical stealth gameplay to make it a truly entertaining and unique game. The best way for me to improve this is to test and iterate on what I already have to balance and create an even stronger gameplay experience.